Hey everyone, today we're talking about Ragbrai 2024 reflections. We're going to be going over our gear hits, misses, and wishes with the team here from Priority Bicycles that did Ragbrai. I'm Will.
I'm Daryl.
I'm Connor.
And joining us virtually is Chase. So think high, medium, low, rosebud, thorn, gear hits, misses, and wishes. We're going to kick it off with our gear hits. So think MVP of gear, something that you're super glad you brought, couldn't live without. Connor, you want to dive in first?
What I was really impressed with the most was my Seat to Summit sleeping bag liner. So it's about $85. I think I just bought it on Amazon. What was nice was last year it was very warm. So last year I actually really just had a packable quilt on me the whole time. This year it got cooler at night. It also got damp at night. So I still wanted the flexibility and the lightness of just going with a light packable quilt. So what was great was with the liner, I could actually put it on and wear it almost like a poncho. I could walk around with it at night as I was getting set up, leave it up a little bit high, and then as I got cooler throughout the night, it could drop down for added warmth and flexibility. I could also leave it on when I was getting up. Again, it was much more damp this year than I had expected from last year. So the tent was a lot wetter, my stuff was a lot wetter in the morning. So I could keep this liner on and almost wear it like a poncho to stay warm as I was getting unpacked. And it was small enough that I could put it in as my last item. So I use this thing every night from setting up my tent to the morning getting packed out.
For me, it was the volet straps. The volet straps for me, and I bought these on Amazon. They came in 3 different lengths. There's like long, short, you know. The good thing about it is these are really, really firm, so you can really like cinch on it. And they have this really cool like hook here. As long as this is up, you just cinch, and then it sort of locks in place like that and stays that way with like tension. So for me, because we had to do laundry every single day, I would use these. I strap down my tent, my clothes on the back of my bike, and it would just dry throughout the day. If I stop for food and I want to just leave something on there, like Celsius was everywhere, so I would always grab them and just strap them there. So if we stop, boom, energy. So these things, super versatile, and I'm gonna keep using them.
Jumping into my gear hit, my number one was the Kickstand. I don't know if you guys saw me out there on the road, but magic wand, great. Shout out Tom Nostrant from Kickstand for getting this to me in time with a tight deadline with Ragbrai. I waited a little too long to order. But if you don't know, Kickstand is basically the same as a tent pole, and it's a kickstand. Depending on your bike, kickstands can be kind of tough to mount and hold a weighted bike, but these work great, and they're super easy, packable, and nothing but good things to say. Go blow up Kickstand. Now over to Chase to talk about his gear hits.
For me, one of the biggest hits of having done this from last year was just having a pannier. Like having the 174 pannier was a huge lifesaver, just being able to toss everything in there. Doing the lightweight thing was fun, and I probably would do it again, but honestly, just my setup overall, having panniers, bags, everything, it made things just so much simpler. Just, hey, I just need to pull stuff out and then pop it back in when I was done. That was one of the nicest things, and it just made each morning and evening so much easier, so much more relaxing, not having to worry about how everything is perfectly, neatly packed into all these little bags. So that was a huge plus for me. Another big hit for me was the SPD sandals, the Ragbrai edition sandals. And I know these catch a lot of flack last year when I did it. I was also a huge skeptic on using those sandals. I thought they were like kind of goofy. They can't be comfortable. Your feet are going to move around too much. And in all honesty, I didn't have any of those issues. Like, no, they're not as stiff as like a racing road shoe or gravel shoe, but they give you that enough of that like clipless pull up on the pedals, and they're just comfortable to be in even in the evening time. You don't have to switch over to shoes if you don't want to. So they were nice to be in. I wish I would have ordered them earlier because they were fresh sandals, and I was getting blisters on my feet, a couple days in, but with like Band-Aids and stuff like that, it was totally fine at the end of the day.
It takes a certain thing to get over wearing Shimano sandals. I don't think I'm at that point where I'd be ready to make the move.
I think that those sandals are the official footwear of Ragbrai.
Oh,
if
yeah.
you can't wear them there, I don't think you can wear them anywhere.
Absolutely. I've never seen those before.
Would you wear them?
With the clip? No. I need my foot to just be, like sealed away from everything around me.
Yeah.
For me, the biggest thing was the change of terrain and how quickly that sort of happened. Like you're on a road one time, and all of a sudden you're on this path. You hit up the gravel, and some of the gravel is loose, so there's there's stuff everywhere. And I'm like, man, I want those to be nice, supposed to be nice and
and keep the dogs
like hidden away
protected.
from all that.
I prefer a tighter shoe in general. So, and I don't mind, like, if you get sweaty and get cool, like the change of it, I would rather have my foot just locked into something where even if there's a lot of moisture or whatever in there, it's like keeps it as a known quantity. Like nothing is going to move no matter what the conditions are. Like even if we got out and got in a water feature of some kind, I was never worried because everything was going to be tight enough that it wasn't going to be a concern for me.
I was also a little afraid of the whole new shoe on a ride thing. I've never done it myself, but I've just always been afraid of that. So like anytime I'm doing, I think anything over 20 miles, I always use like an old pair of shoes or just what I've been using.
Comfortable.
Yeah.
And Chase will touch on this more, but I brought Tevas. I'm not a big Tevas guy, but a Pack Light for my off-bike shoe, and those are brand new. And even just wearing them around the campsite and like wet grass or wearing them in the shower, I was getting blisters just from off-bike stuff. So definitely a good tip to wear things that are tested and tried and true.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw it out. I use Crocs, and those things along with my volet straps. The strap was easy to hold those things down. And with the straps as well, I was able to really quickly switch between shoes. I always had my Crocs on my rack. And you get to town, you can just easily switch shoes, strap down my cycling shoes to my bag, and then I can walk around town. Yeah.
Something I did see was people running road shoes would bring little booties,
I saw that.
and they would keep them in the back of their jersey. So if you're running road shoes, that's always a thought, because no matter how you time it, when you get to town, you will be walking through. So just be mindful that, you're doing 500 miles riding, but there's probably 20 miles of walking. So going over to our gear misses, thinking something of gear you brought that you wish you didn't. I guess I can start it off, kind of going against Daryl here, but I got some of these new volley straps that have 2 hooks to go on my rear rack to hold my tent. And while they worked great riding, I had no issues. At night when I would get to camp, when they were under a lot of load and this bit would be a bit shorter and I would go to pop my tent out in the dark, this one side of the hook would kind of launch and go into the darkness, and I ended up losing both of these hooks on my 2 separate straps. So shout out our friends at Modal, ended up using some reserves of these Modal straps where the hook doesn't come off. I mean, it can, but under load it doesn't. So I ended up switching over to these, which were really great to have. So I think going forward, I guess I didn't think about putting my stuff on the bike, taking it off enough, but these worked great.
Yeah, I think so much is that you think that you're going to get everything set in general, but the reality is that nothing ever packs the way that you think it's going to. The day moves and changes. Things come on and off. Like one day you might decide that your gear's wet and you want to have it on the outside of your bike. So I think the flexibility of how you hold things down is really nice. So like Daryl, to your point with the volets, like for keeping everything just lashed down and set. It's great. I think if you have flexibility with it, things are going to be moving around, or like the size of your packs are changing.
Yes.
The modal has had a lot of flexibility for that, especially too with the different linkage sizes. It was kind of nice to be able to use it as needed.
Even going on the modal hole here, remember when you hit that, you want to go into that story, you hit the bump?
Yeah, like we had I think it was on like day 2 or 3 maybe, and there was a lot of like downhill, and like Will and I were just flying, man. It was just whoosh, the entire time. It was great. At one point, at the bottom of a hill, there was a bump that I couldn't see. I hit that just wrong, and my bags flew off my bike. I was blessed that there was no one behind us, but I needed to use my straps to like finish the entire tour pretty much. And the way it worked is I would just hook my bags on and then use the 2 of these to hold the bags onto the rack. And because these flex a little bit, anytime I hit a bump, it would move slightly, but it would still snap back into place and be secure. So I was super happy to have these, and I still have them on my wrist. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah, the glow in the dark still gets me at night.
100%. 100%.
I was like, who's here?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, the interesting thing, for me, my biggest miss was, I think for what I would change first is that I could control is I had 3 different styles of bibs, like from 3 different brands, thinking like, oh, I could have some flexibility in terms of just fit, and then obviously just having backups for every day. And what I found over time is that even though all were great quality, I would find that there were ones that I naturally wanted to put on. So I had a set of Gorewear bibs that I loved, that I found like in the morning as I was getting ready, if I was going to the alternative, I would find that like, oh, I don't want to put those on for whatever reason. Like when you start to get in autopilot. And the other thing I noticed is that having the variance in chamois every day was, it oddly got uncomfortable. Like you almost wanted regularity in terms of like where your body would sit, because the bike is loaded up and you want to keep some consistency with body position. Yeah. And I felt like the change in bibs every day made me feel like I had to change my body position. So by the end, I threw out 2 sets of bibs by the last day. I was left with my Gorewear. Part of that too is towards the end, I'm like, I'm not even wearing these things. Yeah. Like, I don't want to take these out and put them back in every day. Like, they take up a fair amount of space. So I ended up bailing on them and just riding out. Like, I would have rather had a little bit of sogginess in a bib, but have like regularity and comfort than changing it every day, which to me was like a big learning. So, not like, I think the biggest miss for me was for my own account, carrying a variety of bibs, but then also not just sticking to the one that worked best for me.
That makes sense. That absolutely makes sense. For me, like my biggest miss I found was choosing road shoes on this tour. The shoes were great, and it was really great to not have to care about my foot. My foot is always in place. I know these shoes are gonna work. I know it's gonna be comfortable, but you are stopping at 2 or 3 or 4 different towns throughout the journey. And, while it was easy for me to swap shoes and use my volet straps to hold into my rack, I still had to do that every single time, and it's just extra steps. I just want to, eat a breakfast burrito. I don't want to, swap shoes first and go stand online, get my burrito, swap shoes back, all that extra stress. But for me, like that was my biggest miss, just choosing the wrong shoes for the ride.
Would you have gone just with like a gravel shoe?
I think I would have gone with clip-in Crocs. It's life.
Right to it.
Would you feel different? Like, would you feel the difference of wearing a gravel shoe with an SPD cleat versus your road shoe? Would you have less comfort if you switched over to a different cleat?
I think only because I've never used gravel shoes before.
Yeah.
So I don't have comfort with them. I've just always used road, and that's my roadhouse. But I think from seeing what other riders did, they were just able to unclip from their bike and just go. It never affected anything. You could always clip in. And a lot of this ride, especially early in the mornings, it was are really damp. So I found that I had to get ready, use my Crocs for the majority of it, and then while everyone is starting to ride and riding off, I would have to get to a dry area, change my shoes, and then catch up. And this was every single day.
Yeah, and I feel like these little like tweaks you might not notice day 1 or 2, but day 6 or 7, it's just another chore almost you have to do just to get riding, just to finish. So trying to think about all the little things going into it. I mean, I'm a big planner, and even the things that I thought would be easy by the end, I was like, this is laborious. I wish I didn't do it. So yeah, think about your setup before you go. Over to Chase to talk about his gear misses.
So the things that I wish I really hadn't brought, not that I wouldn't have brought them again, it's just there's a better alternative out there. Number one is this MagSafe battery pack. This works great, you know, if you're walking around town and just need a quick charge on your phone, but for riding with a bike, it really I would have rather used a regular battery charger, which luckily I had multiples of. It's just one of those things, it doesn't hold a huge amount of charge. And when you're trying to like film stuff on your phone, this little lip it gets in the way. You can see in some of the videos that we'll post on social media, there's like almost a little hazy blur at the bottom, and it's this battery pack. So it's one of those things, it's good for about one charge, and then you've got to recharge this again. So it's just another thing to constantly charge, whereas a larger battery pack that just uses a regular USB cable, it's good for multiple charges. You don't have to worry about it day in and day out. The other miss, and I don't want to like dog on this thing because it's like a good thing, is these like thermal canteens. I had these strapped to the front of my bike for a couple days, and I think I used them about 1.5 times. They do keep your water super, super cool, but they are big, they're bulky, they rattle around a lot on the front little side mounts that I had. I just wish I would have had what Will and Connor had, which is a thermal water bottle instead of such a big one. You know, my rationale for having this was, people will probably need water at some point. I can be like, hey, let me get you some water. And there was just never a point where we were so far out that I needed to do that. Because there's always water around. There's always cold water around. So I think just having a thermal water bottle would have been way better than this thing.
It's interesting just though how much access you have to fluids out there. I think it's probably even a change for doing other things, like if that's your expectation, because for us to not have to carry another like 48 ounces of fluids, it changes how much weight you're carrying. So for Chase to have that additional weight on his bike that's a pretty hardy amount of additional weight to carry, especially if you don't need it.
Yeah, and I remember talking to you, this was my first Ragbrai, and I'd done some bike packing before, but nothing quite like this. So I was talking to you before we went, and I was initially thinking I was going to carry 2 21-ounce bottles plus a third 32-ounce Nalgene, 3 bottles set up, and you were like, you're not going more than 10 miles without a place to get water. And after doing it, I think it's even less than 10 miles. I mean, there's stop towns every 10 miles, but past that, there's people at the end of their driveways with water. I mean, you'll be good with water. I think 2 bottles, one for a supplement setup and one for just straight water or a soda or whatever, is a good rule of thumb.
I did exactly that. I just had a 24 ounce in my down tube area, and then in my on my bars I had a 16 ounce, and people are also giving out free waters, which is really cool. Like you are cruising by and someone just like, hey, here you go. I'm just like, thank you. So yeah, you don't. I learned that I can probably even go down out to 1 bottle and be completely fine.
Well, especially when you have 3 Celsius and 3 Red Bulls packed into your
ready.
jersey.
Just ready, just thirsty.
I saw people out there running Camelback setups. I guess if you were running that, you wouldn't need to carry any bottles, but then at night it was nice to just fill up my bottles, get in my tent, and kind of have it all contained versus bringing the backpack and the bladder in. So I thought bottles worked great.
Yeah, people ask, that was a common question or a highly answered and discussed question on the Facebook group, was whether or not something like a Camelback was needed. I think like if you're hot and you have to have that on your body, that can be fairly uncomfortable. Plus, you know, if you need the fluids, it's great to have, but it also, like, having a Camelback on your body, it warms it up. So essentially you're drinking body temperature water in a situation where you don't really need it. So at Ragbrai, I don't think that the Camelback is the way to go.
So like, I'm gonna go a little against that in a way. So even though I was just saying that, you know, you probably don't need a lot of water on you because there are a lot of stops, I realized that some of the longer days, I found that I needed a lot more fluid, and I was so tired I wasn't grabbing as much from people. So I've been doing some research into unpackable bladders, and I think for next year I'm going to try that for some of the longer days. You know, but on the ones I'm looking at, they pack down really small, so it'll just be there if you know, okay, it'll be really hot this day and I'm probably going to suffer a little bit, you know, so having the extra water is definitely going to help.
I guess jumping into gear wishes, something you wish you brought that you didn't, or you saw around that you were envious of, kind of on a similar note. Something I wish I brought was, I brought just classic plastic cycling water bottles, and I wish I brought insulated bottles. Something I saw out there pretty popular. There was times where, I mean, my plastic bottles on the hot days would get warm pretty quick. And yeah, they'd have electrolytes in it and stuff that's good for me, but at a certain point I just wanted something cold. And I felt like I was waiting for those stop towns where there was a kids football team handing out free water bottles. And I was like, thank you, this is ice cold, when having cold liquid throughout the day would give me that little juice. So that was a big gear wish for me. So other than water bottles, my second wish was, if you're running a cycling computer, which is not a necessity for Ragbrai because everyone's going the same way, but a feature that I didn't utilize that I wish I did was, you can set reminders for every 10 miles or every hour, a notification. And I wish I set notifications for eating and drinking, because it's easy not to, and you're out on the bike for 7-8 hours a day, and skipping a few hydration or nutrition points will really bite you in the butt at the end of the day. So just those constant reminders, hey, you're riding with people, you're pace lining, but this is individual, you need to eat. So I wish I set that up. I think that's something I would do going forward.
So we did a video series that was 30 days leading up to Ragbrai, of which you were part of.
This is true.
And two of them, we covered this exact point. One was setting the reminders. Brett Hack, Printer Error, shout out, who gave us the tip. That was one of the first ones.
Yeah.
So you did not watch the series that you were a part of.
Yeah, I definitely did not practice what I preached. And I said I was going to do it, but I was like, oh, I mean, come on, I'll remember. All I have to do is eat and ride. But I mean, you're talking to people, you're in a group, you're looking at the scenery, there's a million awesome things to distract you. And you're like, I'll eat a bar in a little bit, I'll drink in a little bit. And that's fine for the most part, but day 4, day 5, you start to get fatigued. There's the Karis loop in there, there's the gravel sections. I think just being a bit more regimented on my end would have made everything a little better.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, like, as soon as you get past calorie depletion, like, you're just like, you've got nothing that's in like the short-term stores. And I think, you know, when you get in the flow of it, you're like, oh, I'm going to be fine. But like, the reality is, once you get like 30, 40 miles in, I mean, if you're looking at consecutive 70-mile days, like 30 or 40, you hit a certain point where like, you just don't have any short-term stores left. And if you've waited too long, you're going to feel it. And they're like, you know, I think we talked about it a lot out there. Like, and I know that I was pushing it for everybody, was like, just eat real food, like stop and eat something, because those like mile 65, like, you're like, oh, I have 10 miles left. Sometimes that last 10 miles can feel worse than the 60 before it. So I do think like storing up is a huge part of that.
Absolutely. And even for me, like, one of mine was every time I got to town, I just sort of dropped my bike on the ground and left. So I really wished I had a kickstand.
This is Connor's new fancy kickstand because he missed out. But if you're not running a kickstand, Chase actually had just a classic bike kickstand.
Yeah.
And he would always flex on us, pull into town,
OG.
kick that thing right over, and he'd be filled up and ready to go by the time we were just kind of dropping our bikes.
Same
Yeah.
here. I'm just gonna walk away.
It made a huge difference. So I just bought this after seeing Will use it at Ragbrai. A couple things. One, I ended up going with the more segments. I don't know if I would recommend it. I think, Will, you have what, 4?
Yeah, I think this is a 4-fold
And I went with a 6 segment. And
these are the same length, by the way.
Yeah, so the 6 segment can go in this. Yeah, these are the exact same measurements. We rode the same Geminis. And so the thing with the 6 is it can fit smaller into a different bag. So if you were just running like a smaller frame bag, you could fit it in. But the reality is that with the longer size, you can still just strap it to your bike. So I would say if you're buying one, you don't need to feel pressure to get more segments. But when the way that we had our bikes loaded up, the bikes are obviously, ours were very rear weighted. So even when the bike was leaning against you to try and pack it, it could get pretty squirrely, like with the front turning. So yeah, I'm with you. And like getting the kickstand I'm excited to be able to use this just to hold the bike in one place, and to be able to do it quickly. And you can then move around your bike and you can move stuff around on it. You can pack or unpack without feeling like you need to find a place to lean the bike up against something or ask somebody to hold it, or like it sucks to lean your bike against somebody else's bike because you're like, am I going to be the one that knocks over this whole row of bikes for somebody? Just Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure style. But the other thing though that's about finding space is when you get into the towns, it's hard to find somewhere to put your bike because there's bikes and people everywhere. So to be able to just do it anywhere is a huge advantage.
Yeah. And then plus, almost every morning it was pretty damp, and just having my bike down on the ground overnight, I pick it up, and oftentimes it could be a little bit of mud on your handlebars, or on your seat, or on your pedals. And because I was using road pedals, they have to be clean, for me to clip in. So that just caused extra stress in the morning. Pretty much every morning, and because of that, I learned that you 100% should have a kickstand for Ragbrai.
And with a kickstand, you're able to load your bike with it vertical.
Yes.
As Connor was saying, we were running kind of a rear-heavy setup, so 2 pannier bags in the back. But being able to have my bike vertical and just stuff in versus hold stuff, it made the mornings a bit easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine fell a couple times. Mine would fall over while I was packing it, and then pannier pops off, and then you're trying to stand it back up and get it clipped back in. And you're just like, you already don't want to ride 100 miles.
Like, hurry up, Connor, I'm waiting on you, man. Jesus.
I would use it to stall.
Oh, God. My other one was nutrition. So I learned that it's good to have some sort of electrolyte throughout the day. And for me, I wasn't really using anything until the last days where I learned about LMNT. And that stuff, really, really great. So now I learn for future rides just to bring a whole bunch of them. They come in really small packets. It has a lot of sodium, which is going to help you stay hydrated, especially on those really hot days that we had. But for me, a kickstand and LMNT, and I'll be happy.
Now over to Chase for his gear wishes.
For the things that I wish I brought, number 1, a lighter tent. This tent is super cozy. It's comfortable. You could definitely fit 2 people in here if you absolutely needed to, or if you're really close with that person. But it's heavy. It takes a long time to set up. It takes a long time to break down. And having it strapped to the front of my bike was fine for getting it dry in the middle of the day, but it just took up so much space in the pannier that I would have much rather had like a very lightweight bike packing tent that could just either strap to somewhere on the bike or just go in buried somewhere. I just feel like that would have been a better experience every night and every morning getting set up and tearing down. So that's the first thing I wish I would have brought. The second thing is I wish I would have brought a GPS again this year. I had one last year and I figured I didn't need one this year. And there was almost a freeing aspect to not having it and just using Strava on my phone to track everything. But there is kind of a nice little amount of like, hey, we're this far in, we have this much to go. So I do wish I did have one. It is not necessary. I think, again, there is a nice aspect to you hear someone saying like, oh yeah, we only have 5 more miles left to go. And you're like, man, I thought we had 30. This is great. But that can also go the other way around. You're like, I think we have like 5 miles to go. And someone's like, no, it's like 50 left. And you're like, ugh, terrible. So that's another thing I wish I would have had and just didn't bring with me.
I mean, everyone is there so you can't really get lost, but you also can't track your stuff. Like you were saying, you can't use the features for alerts for like hydration and eating, stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty big.
Thing I wish I would have brought, and I know this will sound weird because I had a ton of bags with me. I wish I would have brought 1 or 2 more bags, like a top tube bag, or maybe instead of the canteens, having those like front roll bags. Not so much that I ran out of space, I ran out of compartmentalization. I wish I just didn't have to bunch everything together between like 4 primary bags. If I just had one smaller one just to put a couple extra things in, I think that would have served me a lot better than just bulk throwing everything into these huge bags that I had.
One of the things you were kind of talking about in gear wishes was speakers. And I brought Shock's bone conducting headphones as well as a speaker. And next time I'm only going to bring the bone conducting speakers just because they're easier to carry. You can wear them all the time. They're not annoying. And for those times where you're kind of in a hole or if you're doing the Keras loop and you kind of need to lock in, it's great to just be able to play your own music. But I will say one of my highlights of Ragbrai was there are some pretty big groups out there and some pretty big teams, but it was awesome to hear a group of them coming behind you. And a common setup I saw was a lot of them had JBL speakers that fit in your water bottle holder, but they made a group session on Spotify or whatever your streaming service is, and there'd be maybe 15, 20 of them riding around you and playing the song at the same time, and that would get me hyped up. And I remember there was definitely some end of days where we would hear a group coming behind us, we didn't have too much gas left in the tank, and they'd be playing some pretty good tunes, they'd come around us, they might be going a little quicker than us, and they'd start going off the front, and just to get ourselves home, we would try to stick with them, pace with them, listen to their music. So shout out all the people on Ragbrai with giant speakers. There were some pretty amazing setups, some trailers, some cargo bikes, but there's plenty of tunes. So if you're between headphones or speaker, tons of people have speakers, so I would go headphones, but music is definitely essential.
Yeah, I didn't think about it, but going with the over ears was a huge. I don't think I could go back to in-ear headphones after using them for the last year. I mean, one, I find them much more comfortable, but just the perception awareness, and there's a volume trade-off. They're not as loud as what you're used to. So if you really want to get locked in and have a lot of volume pushing for your music, you're not really going to get that. But the fact that you can have them on all the time, you can turn them on and turn them off. You don't have to take them out of your ears. You're not going to worry about them falling off. And you do have the safety factor of being able to be aware of what's around you. Like I'll have a hard time going back, even if I have to take a phone call on my AirPods, I'm like, I don't want to put them in. Like I just liked having that spatial awareness of the Shocks.
You know, I've never tried those. Yeah, I see a lot of people using them now. Like they're almost at the norm, which is, like you were saying, like way better than the AirPods. For one, you can actually hear things around you, which is a safety factor, you know?
Yeah.
But you still have that option to like zone out and just, you know,
I think one trippy thing with the Shocks is if there's a million different songs that have a police siren in it, and if that song comes on and you're riding in a group and you're in car up, car back, rumple, biker up, that whole Ragbrai mode, and you hear that, you're it's in your head. You're immediately
Yeah.
kind of alert, which is funny, but yeah, I think they're great. I really recommend them.
What insulated bottles did you end up buying?
Yeah, so I ended up getting some Bevo insulated bottles, a company out of Vermont. Huge shout out. They have double-walled insulated bottles, variety of sizes, variety of awesome colors. But I think the biggest distinguishing factor from them is in a standard plastic bottle, everyone's kind of squeezing the water out, but these have, instead of a straw, it's an airflow tube. So you just pop the top and free flow in, and it's a little bit waterboardy, but the water flow is awesome. So I picked up 2, and I'll be using them on my next ride.
And so far, you're fine with the investment of them. They're a bit more expensive.
Yeah,
right?
they're definitely a bit more expensive, but I'd rather pay a little bit more up front and have them last many years. I mean, I've been known to buy some pretty cute limited cycling bottles that are plastic, and I'm always a bit sad when my bottle cage kind of rubs off the graphic or whatever. But these, I mean, they'll get scuffed and banged up, but I like to see the scars on them in the last few years.
Yeah, a couple years ago, I got a Hydro Flask, the insulated Hydro Flask, and I didn't really get it. I was like, oh, like, why would this really matter? But having, I mean, maybe I'm just a little high maintenance, but having the cold, stay cold when your body's starting to break down. Also, like anything that's sugar-based, like anything that when it gets warm and is either sugary or salty, kind of like loses a bit of its, not its flavor, but it gets harder to drink. Like to be able to keep that a few notches down. And I was worried that having like a heavy bottle, for anybody who's maybe thinking about, oh, it's a heavier bottle, like is this thing gonna bounce out, or is it gonna be a hassle, or is it gonna be, am I gonna notice it? Like I didn't notice it all, the trade-off.
Yeah, I think the function outweighs the weight.
Yeah,
for sure.
I would buy, like I'll buy another one and just run 2. And I think the other thing would be interesting, like for anybody who wants to ride in the cooler temps and you're doing something in the morning, like if you're getting a workout in the morning, like to be able to put something hot in there could be really interesting.
Some tea.
Yeah, it could be really interesting.
Our next section will be kind of some FAQs, relevant anecdotes, and some helpful tips past what we've already said for rides like this or Ragbrai in the future. I guess the first one to start with is there's no single way to do it. I guess kind of starting with that is packing. This was my first Ragbrai. I don't know why I thought this, but I thought going in that maybe 50% of the people there would be packing their stuff and carrying it all the way. I think after doing it, it was probably less than 5% were carrying their gear. So there's no single way to do Ragbrai. Yeah. There's no single way to pack your bags. We were running 2 pannier backpack setups. We saw people doing full US tours with front racks and huge setups and winter gear and stuff like that, but there's no single way to do it. I think finding the way that works for you ahead of time, doing a shakedown ride before Ragbrai is always good. But yeah, I think seeing the different setups was really cool.
What would be your learning like from?
In terms of setup?
Yeah, like what did you think versus?
What actually happened?
Yeah, like what would you say like for somebody like doing it, like what was a preconceived notion versus like what you found in actuality out there?
Yeah, I guess I thought that people that were carrying their gear would have these super elite setups and, you know, crazy bikes, crazy setups. I think it was more homegrown, which I liked, where it's like some people had backpacks, some people had backpacks strapped to racks. I mean, it was really, I love bikes and I love setups, and it's a great place to see a variety of that. So I think things that I might have said, oh, there's no way I would just volley strap a backpack to my rack. I saw a lot of people doing that and it worked. So I think having a bit more of an open mind on weight displacement across the bike would be good.
Yeah, it's funny. Like people packing generally are more utilitarian in nature. I think your mentality when you're packing is that I'm here for the fun. Like I'm more built for comfort than speed. So you don't see, I mean, you really rarely do you see anybody who's running an ultralight setup out there. Like it's usually just like a lot more solid. Like even at one point I was like, oh, it'd be nice to like run a leaner setup. I think the difference would be if you were running a leaner setup, like you get to a point where you fully unpack and repack every day. And so the leaner your pack is, like the more work you have to do to get it set back up. So even going with like a larger format, not worrying about every pound or ounce that I was loading in, I think is one of the big things. Was like, you know what, like get it set up right. Don't bring extra stuff. But the reality is, whether you're packing or not, like it's nothing. You don't need to be built for speed out there.
Like crazy thing about that is, even though you'd expect a lot of people who are self-supported to be maybe on the slower side, slow and steady. I noticed that a lot of them were flying. I mean, flying every time you're on a climb, and I'm going a little bit slower, but your pace is a little steady. They're always just through the entire grip, and I saw that the entire time. It is really interesting, because they're passing people who are not carrying their gear. But they are. How are you so fast?
And it was pretty fun being that there were so few people carrying all their gear. I thought it was pretty fun when maybe you were a little down bad, you were on a hill, you were struggling, and someone carrying their gear, maybe more gear than you, would come behind you, and you're like, okay, I'm not in this alone. Hop on their draft and just kind of charge for a few miles.
King drafter.
Yeah, I definitely
King drafter.
Shout
I did
out.
that the last day.
There was one couple with pretty awesome setups carrying all their gear. I definitely drafted off those two for many a miles.
Will drafted off every single person he could find.
And to go back on another point,
Efficiency.
the camelbacks, I'm anti-wearing something, but again, shout out to the people that did have camelbacks. That extra size on their back,
That little
I was
drop.
right in there. Even kids.
Would you guys, for people who are thinking about packing or not packing, would you recommend it or not recommend it?
I'd say try it. It's
Yeah,
fun.
I would 100% recommend it.
Yeah.
I think this being my first Ragbrai and packing it, I feel like I don't have to do it again. I would like to do it again, but I feel like maybe if I'd done a few Ragbrais and I'd done the charter service where you drop your tent and all that stuff, it'd be great, but I think we left nothing on the table. I definitely saw the lines in the morning of people trying to drop off their stuff, and it was pretty awesome to just pack up and go.
Yeah.
It really, even though it's this huge organized event, it definitely gave us some freedom with our days in it. And setting up and packing up, it was good.
But I think part of the whole thing, for me personally, the people who ride it fast, I can't quite wrap my head around it, because I think, I understand that there's wide open roads, and that's such a rarity to get 500 miles of open road to hammer.
Yeah.
But I think that the process of Ragbrai is the most interesting thing. So given that from the minute you wake up, you're thinking about how you're going to manage what you're bringing, that all of that, it enriches the experience. It's not just something that you're offloading. And so I really enjoyed the fact that it just felt like every part of the day, from when we woke up to when we were sleeping, you're just engaged in what you're doing, and you're in control of how you move, where you stop and what you do. And to have that all with you, just to me, is an enriching part of the process.
Absolutely is. And one of the things I really liked was, and this is just having all my stuff, is you get to the site and you can immediately start to just unpack and do everything. So what I did was, I would get to the site, I'll set up everything immediately, and then go shower. Just.
Now kicking over to some hygiene tips. This being my first Ragbrai, wasn't really sure what to expect. I heard from last year's that you guys were jumping in rivers and pools and getting all sorts of diseases, but out of state this year had shower trucks. So let's talk about hygiene a bit.
The hack that I did, so we got hooked up with these cold plunge bars from Everyman Jack, and like you said, last year we were hunting pools and jumping in duck ponds, which gave me double ear infections. So I wouldn't recommend that. And this year I feel like we had a little bit more trouble finding pools at the end of the day. Like they were closing earlier, but as you mentioned, with out of state, we had the shower trucks. So that was probably too, like the biggest advantage. I think a lot of people might ask, like, is a charter worth it? Because it essentially doubles the cost. It's the same cost as your registration, maybe even a little bit more. And the main things you're going to get with this is just a set place to camp and then your own baggage service. But for us this year with out of state, they had showers, which was huge. So the hack for me was I took the cold plunge bar and I chopped it into quarters, and then I would put it in my towel and take that into the shower. So I would go in. By the end of the week, I was wearing pretty much the same thing every day. So I would just go into the shower, fully clothed, soap down, smell better, and then rinse everything off, and then kind of take another shower after I took my clothes off, and then I'd wring everything out. So I think that helped in terms of not having like the mustiness. I mean, there was still dampness, but like it took out the mustiness and things felt fresher, smelled fresher. And like with that quarter size bar, it was nice because I could just roll that right up like in my towel and then just keep it in this. And it was fine if there was a little bit of soap residue, it was a little damp, like it was fine. It was all held in there. It wasn't, I mean, we weren't going for perfection this week, but it worked great as far as like being able to stay feeling fresh. And so I do think that the shower aspect is even more so potentially than where you're sleeping. The shower aspect was something that really like kept you going.
Definitely kept me
across
sane.
the week.
Yeah, for sure. And knowing that it's there, you know, knowing it's there, you're like, okay, the shower is 20 minutes away.
Exactly.
Let's just get to it. You know, it was always great at the end of a ride.
And I think another awesome thing about carrying the bar soap was just having it in your bag would keep your bag smelling better than most. I mean, after day one, I quickly realized that my bags are only going to start smelling worse and worse and worse. And I had my clothes split in different bags, but I mean, like Connor said, you're taking everything out every day, putting it back in. It's a losing game. So having just a clean bar of soap in there, cut up into chunks or whatever it is, kept at least the first waft smelling fresh. So shout out Everyman Jack for sure.
Yeah, I think too, having it as the bar worked out nice because I think if I had a squirt bottle, like I think I would have gone through it a lot faster. It would have been another thing to carry. It takes up more space, and when you're looking at just getting to and from the shower, like being able to just kind of have everything in your hands or like in your pockets was a big convenience factor that made a big difference.
Some other things we could talk about are do's and don'ts, most asked questions. We could talk like tire size, if we want to get nitty gritty.
I mean, nutrition stuff is, I think the nutrition point, like I think the learnings of nutrition, like what did you think nutrition was going to be like versus, you know, because I think that's something that people ask about.
Yeah, I think past like the gels and the supplements on bike stuff, I think I wasn't expecting to see as many of the same vendors at each town as we went through day over day. So I think day 1 or 2, I was kind of sorting out, you know, can I have a giant turkey leg every day? No. Can I have a huge burrito every day? No. But I think learning what the vendors have, I mean, first and foremost, I'd preferably try to get something that's unique to each town. But I ended up finding the burrito truck, taco truck would make bowls. So I would kind of hunt them out and know that a bowl would kind of keep my stomach settled and give me enough nutrients to kind of push to the next town.
Shout out to Casey's, which is like all of them had the exact same thing. You know, so for me, I was able to, well, at the end of my day, I always had their pulled pork sandwich. And I knew that every single town is gonna have a Casey's and every single town would have exactly that. So I ate that for 7 days at night. It was great.
I think it was kind of funny by day 5 or 6, we'd all roll up to Casey's, 20 people would be there, maybe 10 would stay outside, but we all kind of knew each other's Casey orders where it's like, you stay with the bikes, I'll go in. I know Daryl wanted a Celsius Red Bull and a payday, so I'd get him that. I know Connor was more of a breakfast pizza, you know, maybe a little Red Bull or Celsius or coffee. But yeah, the consistency of Casey's was pretty awesome to know in X miles, I'll get my go-go juice or whatever it is. Yes. So big shout out to Casey's. I know they were swamped, but I thought they did a great job of managing the flow and putting a smile on everyone's face. I mean, we're all used to New York City bodegas. I definitely wanted a chopped cheese and a cat in there, but Casey's definitely held it down.
Yeah, the nutrition questions are interesting. Like thinking about the morning flow, like, and how you break up your food throughout the day. I do think that everyone leaves at between 7 and 8. So when you go to Casey's, it's always packed. One of the mornings, because of our bathroom situation, I went over to Casey's early and just got a pizza and brought it back. I do think finding ways to break it up in some of those, especially the early towns, but the first half of the day, the towns are packed. Yeah. So I think you want to figure out like which town, like if you've got 10-mile stops over, for the first 40 miles, I think figuring out which of these am I going to stop and just fill my bottles at versus which ones am I going to eat at. And then I think the other thing in the towns, it's like what you were speaking of, is like breaking it up. So if somebody's like, yeah, I want coffee, they can go get in the coffee line, grab coffees. The breakfast burrito line was long. That had those wraps. Those were amazing. You could split that up a little bit and then cover ground without having to wait, because stopping is important. I think eating real food is important, but on some of the days where we stopped a lot, like it took us a while to get back to camp. And I think like if you can break that stuff up, have a plan for which places you're going to eat at versus which ones you're going to pass through, you could probably save yourself an hour. Because like on a later days, we started getting to the point where it's like, all right, are we blowing through the first one?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll stop at the second one, blow through the third one, stop at the fourth, and then lunch at the fifth. It's like when you get that down, you can operate a lot faster, and making sure that you're keeping food in the body. I think we do maybe just finish up with do's or don'ts, like biggest lesson learned.
I'm trying to think what my biggest lesson learned is.
Ooh,
yeah.
For me.
Yeah, what was the biggest lesson? What would be your biggest lesson to share with people?
You won't need. My biggest lesson to share would be you won't need as much. You won't need as many clothes as you think. I had on my left pack was just a bunch of stuff. I had sweats, I had shorts, I had a few t-shirts, and then I realized by the end I didn't use any of them. I just wore the exact same thing every time. So I could have saved myself like 10 pounds.
I think my biggest takeaway was, there's a lot of hype about this being the hilliest Ragbrai yet. So I was going in, I was a bit nervous about the hills. I haven't done there's not a ton of climbs around New York. There's Bear Mountain, but I was a bit nervous about the hills. But I think the hills weren't bad at all. Even loaded up, I was definitely dropping people on the climbs, but the hardest part for me was the flats with a headwind. That's where I was really thinking about my gear pack choices. We had two big rear panniers, and I could definitely feel them kind of swaying in the wind or sticking out. And you'd come up a hill and you get to a flat section where you could see the water tower of the next town, and it's like, all right, 20 miles till I'm off this flat headwind. And you just kind of try to hunker in and get aero, and that's where I would feel the most drag of the bike. And then there's someone on a tri-bike with an aero helmet zooming by you, and you're kind of like, should I really carry all my stuff? But I think that's where the headphones come in, that's where the nutrition comes in, to be able to hunker down and just push through those flats with a headwind. Definitely need a little more practice on that, but.
I think the thing, so this year's course, I would say, and other people were talking about this too, was maybe less entertaining than the northern routes. And I definitely felt that. Like I was hoping for a few more parties, but the good thing this year is we had such a good group. And I think this year reinforced even more for me that you really want to leverage the people around you to, like, whether it's a headwind situation or whatever, like you can hop on with somebody and talk, you can easily pass a half hour with somebody, and you look up and realize that you've covered however many miles of the day, or you got through the tough hill.
Yeah.
And so I think like making sure that you don't get too isolated out there with your time is something that's important. Like I think that Ragbrai is doable for anybody if anybody asks like, oh, do I think I could do this or not? If you're even going to ask the question, the answer is yes. So when you're out there, really reminding yourself to use the people around you, chat with people. Like if you're starting to feel like your body's tilting a little bit or you're about to get down bad, like grab onto somebody and say, hey, will you ride with me for a little bit? No one's going to say no. So just like say, hey, can I grab a half hour? Can we grab the next 2 or 3 miles? Like, how are you? And I think that's the time passes and it ends up just being a great time.
Yeah.
Now kicking over to some MVP, VIP moments, some stories that really stuck out to us. My favorite was there's a 100-mile option day. And at this point, I think it was day 6, maybe day 5. So we were all kind of in our community flow. We knew how to set up. You get to campsite and it felt like a family, which I thought was pretty sweet. But I remember the day that was the 100-mile, we're all coming in at our various times, various levels of energy and smiles. But we still had our unit. And I remember setting up my tent. I was down bad. I mean, I was pooped. And one of our teammates, who now feels like family, I feel like, Grant,
Grant, dude.
did his first 100-mile. And I remember all of us being around the campsite and him pulling into town, basically just dumping his bike and shooting his hands up. And I think everyone around us was clapping, cheering, maybe crying. It just, that level of stoke and that level of camaraderie was awesome to be around. I mean, like you were saying, if you're asking if you can do Ragbrai, you already can. I mean, there's a variety of skill levels, endurance, yada, yada, yada. But to be able to go through these kind of epic moments with people, it just rubs off on you and it gets you stoked. I mean, shout out Grant for doing the 100 and for being an awesome team player and person to hang out with. That was definitely one of my most hyped moments, I thought.
Well, didn't he run over to his wife?
Yeah, ran over to his partner and she was stoked and they were stoked for each other. They were having feelings of couldn't do without each other, and we're all getting to witness this. I mean, it's one thing to wake up and do 100 miles alone and come back and be like, put it on Strava, yeah, I did it. But to pull up to like 40 or 50 people you met a few days ago that now you're more than friends with, and get to celebrate with, and then do it all again tomorrow, that'll be hype.
And his wife said that she's gonna try a Ragbrai next year, which is
Yeah, I mean, I feel like those little like moments of inspiration bring you back or bring others to it. I mean, it's like a bug to a light, but everyone was stoked.
Yeah, I mean, we had a 200-person team. I think our hang every night was probably about 60 people, and we wanted as many people as possible to come and hang out. And I know some of the team members, you'd see their shirts kind of over, and I think they were like, hey, I also just need some quiet time by myself at the end of the day, which was all good. But having that group around made a huge difference. And I think there's a huge amount of stories. I mean, Rich and Kaylee, dealing with the travel woes and getting there and just showing up and being like big time energy was great. Jack at 13 doing his century and just hammering with us was great. But I think the thing that sticks in my mind is I remember I think we had like consecutive 80-mile days or something, and we're at the end and we're at mile like 76. We're a few miles out. I remember being tired and seeing Helen from our group riding along. She's just, and we're talking, and I feel like we're kind of moving, right? Like we're finishing. We feel like we're finishing strong, but tired. And I remember seeing Helen, and she's kind of like working her way up a hill. Kind of looked like she was fighting through it a little bit, and like, hey Helen, I remember not wanting to bother her because I felt like we were in move mode, and I didn't want it to feel like we're blowing past her, right? But like we're going by, so I just was like, hey Helen, just to acknowledge, like, hey, it's our team, like, want to say what's up. And she just looks over, huge smile on her face. She's like, hey guys, how's it going? Just awesome attitude. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, we're kind of getting this done. I don't want to offend her by having a group of us blow by her and be, demoralizing. Meanwhile, she's having a great time, enjoying all parts of it. And I remember just thinking, oh man, I got to like let go of any of these preconceived notions and just ride and enjoy this part of it. Like everybody is doing it in their own way, and she just had a great attitude. And it also reminded me that if at any point I felt tired or like, it's an attitude issue. And so I carried that with me like throughout the rest of the trip, and then even beyond that, just thinking about how positive and how great she was, riding up a hill with 2 miles left on a long day. But like that, I think that's something that we can all learn from. It's something that I carry with me.
For a VIP shout out for me, I hope I'm getting this guy's name right. There was a guy, I'm going to say he was like 15 years old, and it was one of the like day 6 or day 5 of the gravel routes, and one of the gravel routes was just unmaintained roads, and it was sketchy. Like there was just super steep descents and lots of like erosion. You could easily lose traction on these. And there is a guy just like sitting at the top of a hill where this gravel route started. And he was like looking at it, and he's on a mountain bike, and I'm on my sauce that's fixed gear. And he's like looking at it, and I was like, "Oh, dude, you got this. You're on a mountain bike." He's like, "Yeah, I'm with a group of friends, and they're all on like really skinny road bike tires, and I don't know if they want to do this." So I'm like, "Well, text them and let's go." And he's like, "Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to do this." And I was like, "You have all the gears, you have suspension, you can do this. Just send it and you'll crush it." So him and I just sped through that gravel section. Our tires washed out a couple times and we recovered, and it was a ton of fun, and he was super thankful. I ended up seeing him a couple days later. And you know, he was just like super glad to see me, and glad that he did it. So like props to him. Again, I think his name was David. There was also one guy I ended up riding with, and this is kind of the magic of Ragbrai, right? Is just all these strangers, just there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people riding bikes, and each one of them has a unique individual story that you can hear from. And I ended up riding for, I want to say 15 miles with this guy that was like on a Trek hybrid. And we're just cruising, and he's booking, and I'm just like, "Well, what inspired you to do this, man? Like, you know, you're killing it." And he's like, "Oh, I just started riding bikes like 3 months ago. Like I learned how to ride a bike as a kid and then never touched one again. And 3 months ago I bought this bike and I really liked it. And my friends told me about this, and here I am." And I'm just like, this guy has been riding a bike for 3 months, and I know people who've been riding bikes for years, and they're still like, "I don't think I could do it." Anyone can do Ragbrai, and I think that dude was just such a testament for how capable you can be and how accessible and enjoyable Ragbrai is as a whole. So for those two guys, like, definitely want to shout them out. They were just really cool to talk to. I think they were really inspiring. I think just people overcoming themselves is always an awesome thing to see. So yeah, those are my two VIPs that I just really enjoyed getting time to spend with.
And for me, I realized that speaking about a community and like energy, it's really big. Like for me, I'm more of a racer, so all the things that we do are either on your own or just really fast. You don't really get a chance to experience the areas around you, you know. And in Ragbrai, on the mornings where like Team Doozer and just everyone was rolling out as a squad, and we're the best. The energy was pure. Everyone was happy. They're all speaking about the previous day or plans for the day ahead, and it's just so good. I miss it.
Yeah, the Doozer, you know, I think too, we haven't talked about the Doozer factor because obviously we just, not that we take it for granted, but I think we've all expected that, like, we all know that the reason that everybody is there and that the vibe is so tight is because of what Doozer brings to it. I think when we got out onto the track and had the meetup at the track, and those were also people who weren't necessarily in our group, who we didn't get to see every day. Doozer talking about just that lesson, like bringing Ragbrai with you everywhere. So like the willingness to give somebody a high five, say hello to somebody, ask somebody how they're doing, ride with them for a bit, like to just take that mentality forward is a huge thing. So that was also a great point in that trip, to have the Doozer meetup, have the Doozer speaking event, just get that reminder articulated to all of us. And then also it was a great break from just, you know, feeling like, oh, we got to get into camp, get set up, get food. Like, it gave us a chance to get a break, get together, meet new people. Yeah. And that was a great part of the trip.
Sweet. So those were our hits, misses, and wishes, as well as some helpful tips for Ragbrai. Let us know what you thought was most important or what you missed out on, and we look forward to seeing you next year.